In many ways, Judaism's very survival has been predicated on decisions and halakhic rulings of the leading Jewish sages in any given generation. Their rulings have served to literally save the Jewish community countless times throughout history. During the time of the Maccabees, after a mindless slaughter of Jewish families hiding in a cave on Shabbat, the Jews were permitted to take up arms even on that holy day if threatened. And in the time of Alexander the Great, Shimon HaZedek, Simon the Just, saw it fit to wear the high priest vestments beyond the temple precincts, causing Alexander to bow to him and enable the Jews to have the Greeks deal amicably with them during his reign. And at the time, other halakhic rulings were installed, like naming Jewish boys Alexander or variants thereof to avoid statues of him being erected in the temple itself. And during the Roman siege of Jerusalem, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's quick thinking won the admiration of Vespasian, Rome's new emperor, that ultimately led to the establishment of a house of study in Yavne and the preservation of Torah during one of Israel's darkest moments. Not for nothing does it say in Devarim 17:9-11, "You are to go to the priests and the judge who preside at the time and inquire of them, and they will give you a verdict. You shall do according to the sentence which they pronounce upon you in that place. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left from that decision that they declare to you." We are also assured that a lawgiver will never depart from between the feet of Yehuda until Shiloh comes, and that comes from Bereshit 49:10. Shiloh, incidentally, is one of the many titles of Mashiach. These men were the cream of the crop of the Jewish nation and of the human race in general. If one studies their lifestyles, conduct, and teachings, you will see men of impeccable character with sharp Torah-centric minds. In recent years, a Jewish sage has come onto the scene with some halakhic rulings that drew so much attention that it literally put his life in danger. His method of ruling was truly unique. When confronted with a question on a topic, his answers were totally devoid of any form of political correctness, popular cultural influence, or even fear of the subtle shifts in perception of normalcy in the Jewish world. He never postured his answers to cater to the individual sensibilities of a person asking the question, paying no regard to his station in life, profession, or even level of influence. He once wrote, "My entire worldview stems only from knowledge of the Torah without any mixture of outside ideas, whose judgment is truth, whether it is strict or lenient. Arguments derived from foreign outlooks or false opinions of the heart are nothing." Join me now as we look into the fascinating life and teachings of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was born on Adar 7, 5655, which is 1895 of the Common Era, on the same day as our teacher Moshe Rabbeinu's birth and passing. From his youth, he demonstrated exceptional diligence and intelligence, drawing his inspiration from his father, the Gaon, Rabbi David Feinstein, the Rav of a small town in Ustar in White Russia. The young Moshe absorbed a love of the Torah from his father, and all his friends spoke of his great diligence in Torah study, a diligence that knew no bounds. He himself related that already by the age of 11, he was fully versed in many orders of the Mishnah, including Nashim, dealing with civil law, the Moed, which is festivals, which is the second order of the Mishnah, which is the first written recording of the oral Torah, made up of a total of 6 orders. The speed of his comprehension was astounding. All it took was a quick glance or a brief listening to, and he immediately grasped something from every angle. His brother-in-law, Reuven Levovitz, said that he was downtown with Rabbi Moshe, surrounded by skyscrapers, and he said, "I was stunned when Rabbi Moshe glanced up at one of them and accurately gauged how many floors it had. When I asked him how he did it, he very simply said, 'I count by the dozens.'" When he was still young, he became the Rav and father of the Beit Din of Lublin in the Minsk region of White Russia. There he remained as a Rav during the first years of the Communist Revolution, despite the government's persecution of rabbis. He continued his studies with great diligence, although his entire family lived in a small room adjoining the only remaining synagogue in Lublin. He managed to sit down in a corner to study, oblivious to all else. In 1936, he succeeded in leaving the Soviet Union with his family and moved to the United States, where he settled in New York. He became the Rosh Yeshiva yeshiva of Tiferet, Jerusalem, remaining as such for the rest of his life. He retained his great diligence in Torah study. He studied with every spare minute he had, and needless to say, he immersed himself in study during the night. After a few years in the New World, he also became known as one of the finest rabbis, great in Torah and filled with virtues and good deeds. Even though Rabbi Moshe was still relatively young, in his 40s, and there were still great Torah greats and special giants in America during that time, he was still known as the Gaon, as he was perfectly versed with all areas of the Torah. From that time on, many of the rabbis began to address Torah questions to him. If a serious question presented itself to rabbis and they could not reach a decision, they addressed themselves to Rabbi Moshe, who decided the matter. But why did so many people address themselves to him? Many believe it was because they saw in Rabbi Moshe a Gaon, a posek of generations past. Despite his greatness in Torah, he was very humble. All who came to ask him a question on Halacha did not feel in any way uncomfortable, for Rabbi Moshe spoke to them as equals. He treated everyone who met him with great respect, and his heart was always open to anyone afflicted by troubles, hastening wherever he could to help them. This is how he became precious in the eyes of all who came in contact with him. In a short time, he became recognized as the posek of the generation and the spiritual leader of the Jewish people. During the day, rabbis and rabbis came to him with questions of Halacha. He received everyone warmly, even regular people whom he rose to greet. He was always the first to say hello, and on Shabbat he was particularly careful to say good Shabbos to every Jew he met, no matter what their standing was. Not only was Rabbi Moshe a tremendous Gaon in Torah, he was also a Gaon in humility. He had a heart of gold, and he loved all men, for they are created in the image of Elohim. He would normally open up a folding bed 2 o'clock in the afternoon, in which he would lay down for about 45 minutes. It once happened that a man saw him studying at that time rather than laying down as usual. He approached Rabbi Moshe and asked him why he had deferred from his normal behavior, and he simply responded, "Your young son, 3 years old at the time, came to me and said that he wanted to lie down on the bed, so I got up and let him sleep. Your son made me study additional Torah." He then added, with a smile coming to his lips, he should be thanked for it. The man then approached the bed and saw his own son sleeping soundly. It was also during the summer that someone saw Rabbi Moshe dealing with questions at length without consulting a book. One day he allowed someone to look at a response that he had written on 17 large sheets of paper. What he noticed was astounding. Rabbi Moshe had written it all out and without consulting a single book. For Tisha B'Av, he carefully respected all the customs mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. One particular Tisha B'Av, after praying and reciting Lamentations, which was said almost until midnight, he asked that the Book of Lamentations be read. He was told, however, that there was nobody present who knew how to read it. Upon hearing this, he immediately sat down on the ground and read the entire book to everyone there. Afterwards, he wanted to go to the cemetery, but fearing for his health, those present told him that the cemetery was far too away and that it was very hot outside. However, he insisted, for he absolutely wanted to fulfill this custom. Needless to say, his wishes were respected. Even after he devoted his days and nights to Torah study and writing his books Igret Moshe and Dibrat Moshe, he was always ready to help others. He had the habit of visiting Jewish homes during days of joy as well as days of mourning. Even when he was ill, his home was open to visitors. During the last days of his life, he said to his family, "I no longer have any strength. I can no longer render halakhic decisions." It was as if he had said, "My role in life has ended." 8 years before his passing, his doctors wanted to implant a pacemaker in him and asked him for some time to consider the idea. He reasoned that Mashiach would soon arrive and that the Sanhedrin would return to its place in the Lishkat HaGezit, that is the chamber of hewn stone, and he was unsure if he could sit in the Sanhedrin, for Halacha does not allow an infirm man to sit there, and he wondered if a man implanted with a pacemaker is considered as being infirm or not. He pondered the question and added that it was possible, yet because of our many sins, he was taken away before the arrival of Mashiach. Rabbi Moshe was buried in Har HaMenachut cemetery in Jerusalem, next to the graves of the Belzer Rabbi and the Gaon of Tichbin. During his life, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein faced intense opposition from Hasidic orthodoxy on several controversial decisions, such as rulings on artificial insemination and Mekitza, which is the division of men and women in synagogues. And in 1973, a book was published called Mi'anei Ligrot, comprising more than 160 refutations against the rabbi, though the book was rejected by Jewish bookstores and was actually burned by some people. For a while there, some things were touch and go, with some people closest to him carrying genuine fears for his life. You see, when Rabbi Moshe Feinstein would investigate a halakha, he would do something quite interesting. He would go back to the earliest rulings and he would work back from there, and in some cases his rulings went against halakha from later eras. Some of his pasukim included that if a woman held out her hand in greeting, that a man may shake her hand, and that an Orthodox Jew should not have any association or contact whatsoever with Reformed Jews. He also felt that it was not possible in modern times to have an Eruv, which is a Shabbat boundary around a Jewish community. Despite these controversial rulings, some of his detractors, while disagreeing with specific rulings, still considered him to be a leading decisor of Jewish law. But why? Rav Moshe Feinstein was accessible. He didn't have a huge entourage of people around him. He answered his own phone and he opened his own door. He was a simple rabbi who lived in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He had a very broad appeal and average people could talk to him in person or over the phone quite easily. He did not contend that the difference between boys and girls was a qualitative one, meaning that women were no less capable as students or teachers, they just need to know different things. Thus, although the purpose and content of their education differs, their capacity for knowledge, particularly Torah knowledge, is not unequal. It's worth noting before I finish up that some 200,000 people actually escorted his coffin along its final journey, and it was the largest funeral that had taken place in Israel at that time. Tens of thousands of people came from all around the world to honor this man who devoted his entire life to the Jewish people, the Torah, and the land of Israel. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Insight into the Jewish Sages. Bye for now. If you like the content of this channel, get a hold of this book. It is literally jam-packed with information you will not find in most Torah publications. Its pages include topics like the fable of the money-hungry Jew, the lie that propelled the Holocaust, the real root of anti-Semitism, rightly dividing Mashiach, which contains startling truths about the Messiah you will not read anywhere else, Judaism in the New Testament, updated information about the creation of the Golem and the false Messiah, the commandment to wage war, the truth about the Shield of David, a compendium of all the false teachings in the Messianic movement to help you navigate what is truth, biblical capital punishment, and why you should be frightened of sinning, the significance of the land of Israel, the obligations of the student, the eye in the triangle, sanctified sex, how to think like a Jew, and much, much more. There is also an updated chapter 1, and along with all the other chapters, has hundreds of footnotes and references. This is a book that took 10 years to research and compile, and will be a welcome addition to the library of any discerning student of Torah and Mashiach. Get it today on Amazon and other online bookstores. Bye for now.